there was no way anybody was pulling me off that course.
It was just more.
It was,
It's like, it's fine.
I had prepared myself. The only way that they were going to take me off that course was on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And even then, they would have had to strap me into it.
Welcome to the Success Times Happiness podcast, a platform dedicated to engaging discussions with inspiring individuals aimed at nurturing personal development. I'm Richard Thompson, your host, a father, entrepreneur, world champion Ultraman, and passionate about all things high performance. Our mission is to empower both ourselves and you to unlocking our fullest potential, recognizing that this life is no dress rehearsal. While I may not have all the answers, this show serves as our collective journey to uncover them. Today's chat is with Tim Webb. Tim is ex-Special Forces and now the founder and director of the not-for-profit organisation SOTER International. Tim's story is impactful. I left the conversation being inspired to work harder at my own resilience when the hard times hit. After training up in the military from a young age and several Middle East deployments in war later, Tim exited the army and went on to start SOTER, with the intention to prevent trauma injury to high-risk industries through medical training and equipment. Expect to learn how Tim got through the 3-week SAS training camp, what his deployment in the Middle East was like, and what being shot at by terrorists in the desert feels like. Also, coming out on the other side of the military, dealing with PTSD, and how he found purpose through his non-for-profit organisation. We could all become a little more resilient like Tim, and I can't thank him enough for being so open and honest throughout the chat. All right, let's get into it. Tim Webb, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
No, my pleasure.
I'm going to kick off with a question that I've never asked before. With everything you've experienced over the last 2 decades, what would you say to your, let's say, 20-year-old self with the information and the knowledge and the lessons you've got now?
Way to start light, mate. Yeah, okay. Trust the process. I think the biggest lesson, the world's not going to treat you fairly. If I could go back to my 20-year-old self and say the world's not fair, I think that would have helped me prepare some critical moments for me to handle a little more objectively.
I think everyone has to experience that lesson at some point, right? And what age you learn that lesson that life isn't fair is pivotal. Like some people learn it really young.
Really early.
Like
and
childhood.
Correct, yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
And some, learn it very late in life and have a fairly, lack of a better description, a sheltered life away from that injustice, I guess.
Yeah. And, the flip side to that is, I'm eternally grateful for the upbringing I had because, my parents are amazing. One of 4 kids, the youngest, possibly the golden child, as I keep being told by my siblings. Christian family. And, it was sheltered from me, I think. My parents definitely, went through struggles that every parent did in the 80s, raising kids. We just need to look at interest rates back then alone, just managing a household. But, I don't recall the world not being fair. And when that later hit me in the face, moral injustice.
As parents, I get it. You don't want to. You know that it isn't, and they'll learn it at some point, and it's just about teaching them at the right time in the right way. Yeah, it's not easy.
No, and it's probably one of the things that you take on as a parent, where you try to right the wrongs. That is something that I just have shifted that fraction from how I was brought up to just make sure that I sort of mark that with the kids at the times that things happen, to say, well, it's okay. Things don't happen according to plan or potentially, aren't fair. And that can be anything from a sporting game through to friendships.
Yeah. How do you get around internally for you as that's the message? How do you see the upside? How do you see the optimist? How do you have an optimistic view, knowing that you're playing in a game that's essentially
rigged
to be unfair?
You'll find a better you. I think ultimately for me, my life, what I've taken out of my life the most is, and we'll get into it, the post-traumatic growth. We've spoken, briefly previously. Both of us want to share our experiences to help better prepare people out in the world to not have to have that incident, not have to have whatever that catalyst is for them to go and hit rock bottom, or, you know, have an event for them to go, right, I really need to do something about this.
Yeah.
We're both in that space of sharing our stories so that people can learn. And, you know, you look at the magnitude of podcasts out there as well in the world, and I listen to it, you know, half a dozen of them. They're fantastic resources. And so for us to be able to help people, you know, and it's not restricted to people that, you know, can get onto a podcast or the like. There is so many resources out there just with the internet to be able to self-educate and learn in today's day and age that, yeah.
I think everyone's going to go through those episodes in their life where the floor just evaporates from beneath you and you just have no idea what to do. And I like the analogy of like you're leveling up. I think we discussed this, like it's like a video game where you get the skills on this level to beat the boss at the end. And then you go to the next level and then you have to get the skills into that level to then beat that boss. And sometimes the boss is like 10 levels in front of you that you're facing. It's the biggest dragon you've ever seen, and the floor just evaporates and you're a shell of a human. And that's when the resources, I do believe that event happens to everyone. Like that will come at some point, whether you're ready or not. And I don't think that's unavoidable. And I don't believe, you know, I'm looking deeply at the moment into stillness and to be able to handle, you know, to be that rock where the waves crash over and just being unaffected. And I think that's not a bad position, but going to experience that event where in any event, right, it's going to happen. And so if we can learn from like your powerful and inspiring story and experience that helping people get out of that, I think it's unavoidable that you're going to experience rock bottom for in your own life at some point. And maybe you don't, but someone you know will. And then to be able to share little bits of knowledge that other people have leaned upon or have used, because that's what got me out of mine, right? Who was Tim out of school?
Tim Webb. Yeah, grew up Melbourne, middle class family. Had ambitions at the end of high school to join the Air Force. Found out I had a mild colour vision deficiency. And
what drew you to defence?
Interestingly enough, I actually grew up next to an army barracks and went to annual demonstrations just before Christmas, saw tanks, blank firing and all these sorts of things. Okay. And it was great to watch, helicopters flying over. Never wanted to join the army. I did have a bit of a family lineage from as far back as World War I on my mother's side. So my father was conscripted to Vietnam, ironically because he had glasses, probably didn't go into infantry, so made it reasonably safer for him. And as a result, one of 4 kids, things could have been different, sliding door moments. Top Gun.
Okay.
Yeah, 1980s, right?
Sure.
Top Gun movie, I think, and wanted to be a fighter pilot. So yeah, leaving, you know, year 12, I really I didn't have an ambition to do anything. I would have studied hard. I was capable. I certainly let myself slide in that final year. So I found myself drifting out of high school, equivalent full-time job, just in a local cinemas. Yeah. And I actually went to a psychology service that profiles, you know, your character and advises on, you know, what careers might suit you. Yeah, military, police, you know, emergency services all came up, very regimented sort of upbringing. Yeah. And then I had a close mate joining the Army Reserves. Also, my brother-in-law at the time. So my closest sister, who's 5 years older than me, her husband was joining RMC Duntroon to do officer training.
Yeah, okay.
So I started reading a few books. At the time, those books were all centered around 22 SAS, the United Kingdom Special Forces Unit, primary Special Forces Unit. And that just got, I guess, a lot of those boyhood sort of ambitions and life of action.
The best of the best.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And did your colour blindness when did that come into play?
I knew prior to even talking to recruiting that you needed perfect colour vision to be a pilot. So I was distraught at one point in year 12. I think it might have even been at the end of year 11 to just know that that wasn't going to happen. I didn't think the colour blindness was going to be an issue with the military. And then I go into recruiting and you do a day's worth of aptitude tests and mechanical tests, health, sort of physical. They bring up the very basic Ishihara book test. I'm sure a lot of people have seen. It's just the coloured dots.
The dots, yeah.
And it's just a qualitative test. It just tells you if you've got an issue or you don't. And from that test, though, they just mark you down to the lowest level. So what that did was took me from colour perception level 1 to colour perception level 3 and took about 95% of the jobs in the army off the table. So they offered me to be a cook, a clerk, or a truck driver. And I just said, thanks, no thanks, and walked out. And part of that was also because I tanked on the aptitude testing. I'd been out of school for 18 months, hadn't touched anything academic, let, I guess, a lot of things slide as you do coming out of school. That just prompted me to be, I think, the first step in my life where I went, no, that's not me. I can do better. And borrowed my girlfriend at the time's younger sister was going through year 12 and just grabbed the books and hit them for a couple of weeks, went back and went through the aptitude test again. And even with the colour perception issue, they opened up a number of jobs.
Okay.
At that point, I saw a little bit behind the curtain of a large bureaucratic government organisation, and they were keen to get me in full time. And I said, you know what, let's just put the brakes on here. I'm going to go part time. The defining moment also in doing that was I had met, again, local to my house at that nearby army barracks, some mates, older brothers that had gone in and happened to be posted to a specific unit in that area. And it was a Commando signalling unit. So I'm part of the 1st Commando Regiment, which is the part-time commando capability. Well, they gave me some very good advice to be like, go part-time, come in here, and it's going to be leaps and bounds ahead of whatever you're going to do in the full-time army for the next 2 to 3 years. So that's what I did.
Yeah, okay. What was the end goal at that point, do you think?
The end goal at that point was still just to, test the waters and go full-time army in no special capacity. And there was a point over the next few years, next 2 or so years, that I tried to do that, just go through, because that's what 90% of people do, is they'll join the full-time army and do their 3 or 4 years of slugging it out in a regular unit and then give Special Forces selection a try. Recruit Training Base Kapuka in December 98. At the age of 19, by the age of 21, I was attempting what is now the 2nd Commando Regiment. At the time, it was for RAR Commando, the unit title. Their Commando selection course. There's not too many people younger than that. There are a few.
Yeah, right. A 21-year-old doing essentially the SAS.
No, Commando one. Okay. So slightly different. They're a combined course now.
And what's entailed in that? What are we looking at?
3 weeks of a combined basic training and selection course.
And how many people? This is for essentially Special Forces?
Yeah. So for RAR Commando at the time, this is leading into the Sydney Olympics, was chartered with building a commando capability, a large-scale offensive operations capability for conventional warfare, but also they'd identified that a company out of that unit, so about 90 to 100 guys, was going to form the Tactical Assault Group East to help support the Olympics, because at that time, Special Air Service Regiment was the only people doing counter-terrorism, and the scale of, obviously, something like the Olympics required a lot more resources, and particularly people on the ground, to be able to do multi-target
type assaults. How many people started that camp, that 3 week?
Probably around 80 on that one. A reasonable pass rate. It was a capability that was being grown in-house, so there was a lot of guys posted into the unit that were training up specifically for that, that knew that if they did well, they were going to stay in that unit. That was the very beginnings of what is now one of the premier Special Forces units in the world, based on their combat experience and growth from that point then through to departing Afghanistan in 2014 and then Iraq 2017 and a few other things. But I was a reservist. I was part-time. I wasn't in there training, in the army every single day. I was maybe pulling about 100 days a year.
Yeah.
Whilst working at a cinemas.
Are you
as a projectionist?
Are you at that point going, oh, I've got the knack for this, or I just cut a bit differently? Because it's your ability to endure, right? That's half the battle, I'd imagine. All of this testing and the 3 weeks with the heavy packs and
fire and movement drills and all sorts of more advanced infantry training than what even standard infantry, standard forces do in the army. I remember getting to the unit, that signals 126 Commando signal unit, and the first range shoot we did blew my mind. I'd access to submachine guns and pistols and shotguns and all sorts of things that are just not seen in the regular army. So, but as far as did I see the tapestry of the cloth, I guess that that I was made from, not at that point. I just thought I still don't think I'm anything special, but I made some great friendships on that course, people that I think saw that in me.
Mm.
And I was just speaking to a friend the other day, and he spoke of an old mate, and from that activity, that 3-week activity, still holds me in high regard, even though we probably haven't seen each other in 20 years. That came through, again, that sort of 2 to 3 year period in the reserve unit, working with some full-time soldiers. There was a small number in there, and they remain some of the best mentors that I had across my all-up reserve and full-time Army career of 15 years. Some of the best mentors I've ever had. Yeah, have taught me some fundamentals about managing people, trust, respect, integrity.
Before you were deployed to Afghanistan, there was another 3-week, and I excuse my ignorance, I call it a tryout, but presumably it's essentially a test, right?
So the chronology here is I decided to join full-time. I'd done enough basic commando courses to earn my Sherwood Green Beret. And at the time, seeing that this 4-hour full-time commando capability was being raised, I went, hey, I want a piece of this. This is a really great opportunity. I'm doing this stuff part-time, and there's, they're screaming out for people to come in and build this. I put in the paperwork to transition to full-time, got stuffed around, had to go back, do some other training in my signals trade. So that's just communications, radio communications, IT, touch typing. Best skill I actually got out of that 6-month period. Then went and got posted into the Commando unit full-time.
Right.
Did 2 years there, got deployed to Iraq in 2003. And that was very much a flag in the sand type presence for that unit because it was young, it was untested. There was a lot of money and resources, so weaponry and things like that. But we were ultimately there to have a presence. We did some base security in the neighbouring country to Iraq that we were based in. We supported the squadron from Special Air Service Regiment that were there in a squadron's worth of cars. So we're talking at least 15 cars kicking around through the Western Desert, the 6-wheelers with 50 caliber machine guns on the back and all that sort of thing. So lots of firepower, lots of mobility. And we were essentially given the role of base security and quick reaction force to support them. But that was not really going to happen. Potentially a downed pilot, a UK or a US pilot that got shot down. We might have been somebody that was reacted with other assets. But our quick reaction force was 30 blokes on a Chinook helicopter with one ATV with a decent machine gun on the back, of 50 caliber or something. So it was very much a frustrating deployment as well, because I know all the guys in that company had built up, we felt like we were going to be given an opportunity to have a run, really didn't.
And your mindset here it's what you're really wanting, is you're wanting to be sort of let off and do what you've been trained to do. And I don't know how best to describe what the best outcome is here.
I think, the analogy that everybody uses is footy player, footy team. You're training for that team. You're training to play a game, AFL or whatever your code is. You're trying to make the A grade. And you want to run out onto that field and feel and see every component of it and know that you can be tested and survive.
Yeah, but a footy game isn't going to kill you.
It doesn't. But, hats off to
But that doesn't stop you, right?
No.
You're obviously going, I still want to go and play when the game's on.
Yeah. It's hard to describe, but, and this is where the utmost respect to anybody that signs up to the Defence Force, whether or not they've truly, conceived exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it. I certainly did. I'd seen some friends that maybe hadn't earlier in their career and some things that just came up that I'm sort of like, okay, they've got time still to I guess develop that. But I knew very much so that the purpose that I was going in for was to represent something larger than myself. I had that altruistic drive. I needed to.
Is the desire in that moment, Jocko Willink has said in the past that some people look at it and go, I do it for my country, but really the real draw is that you're just doing it with the people that you in your company, in your group. Is it that micro, or is the altruistic that micro to the group that you're with, that you're deployed, or are you genuinely looking back and go, I am doing this for the country?
I certainly did it for a greater good. That's something that I've just realised is in my DNA.
Yeah.
Throughout the beginning of my career in the military through to everything until now.
Yeah.
there's been this underlying theme that it has
It's a
to be.
true value of yours.
Yes. I can't obviously answer for anybody else, but I would say that Jocko is correct in once you're there, it's very much, I mean, obviously you have a mission, you have whatever capability it is within your role that you are supporting towards the government of the day, their pursuits, but yeah, once you're there, you don't want to let the guy next to you down.
Yeah.
And that's just the esprit de corps of high functioning elite units, particularly at a base layer within the Defence Force. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be the person that is letting the team down.
I mean, that's teamwork 101, right?
Yeah.
In any capacity, in any sphere of life, is that you want to build a team where everyone doesn't want to let each other down. Talk to me about your deployments and how that impacted you as a human.
Other than individual learnings from Iraq in 2003, there was nothing of great significance. I came back from that and applied for SAS selection in 2004.
Right.
And that was the next 3-week course that.
Yeah. So you were frustrated to the extent over in Iraq that you were like, well, we were just there.
I just could see the writing on the wall that this unit was going to take longer than I anticipated to get the opportunity to do what it was capable of. The maturity in Special Forces at the time was with SAS, and the commandos in a full-time capacity really only had just been raised a year or two earlier. So it had always been in the back of my mind that I was always going to try to go over the west to Perth. So, and that was the cementing moment where I'm like, this is gonna take too long. At this stage, I'm thinking I'm going to be in the military for 10 years, and so I gave SAS selection a shot.
And that was a 3-week.
3-week course that I trained up for. Training 3 times a day, typically, at least a couple of times a week, and probably train 6 days a week.
Yeah. Okay.
That 3-week course in February of 2004, one of the hardest things I've done,
right?
Physically and mentally. We had 168, I think, starting, because I was candidate 165 or thereabouts.
With the W.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a silent running course. You don't get any feedback. You'll have somebody standing there with a small notepad, writing with a red pen or a black pen, and they may choose a red pen just to play on your mind.
So you don't get any feedback for 3 weeks. And what are you looking at? Give us a summary of a day.
Oh, it's broken down into 3 phases. There's numerous military podcasts out there that your listeners can go to if they're interested. But the first phase is essentially, let's just filter it out straight away. 20-kilometer pack marches, all the basic stuff, 3.2-kilometer run with your patrol order. So that's about 7.5 kilo, and your boots, your camouflage, your rifle. It's really hard to do in about 16 minutes. That's kind of one of those tests that just filters people out really quickly. Now, you've already done this over 3 days before you even go onto this course.
Right.
So from that 168, you've actually probably had many hundred more that have gone and tried to do the 3 days and then actually not got on the course. They just, smash you with a lot of physical exercises, probably, 18 hours a day. You're getting minimal sleep, you're getting woken up throughout the night, and you do that for the first 5 or 6 days. Push-ups don't come in any less than 50 at a time. If somebody has done something wrong, you'll just get another 50, the whole group. Right. So bastardization at its best, but there's a method to the madness. It's purposeful.
And how quickly are people dropping in the first week?
Exponentially.
Yeah, right.
Like it's almost like a cold. People will see someone drop off and they'll be like, oh God, that guy's gone. He's a machine. He's from my unit.
He can't do it.
It's also everybody's threshold is just different. People are wired differently. Look, in that first week, you're probably halved. You're probably down to 80.
Yeah, okay.
I couldn't tell you exactly.
Yeah.
But, you get a large drop off. First couple of days, you get some good numbers, and then during these activities, you might be on a truck. You get doing an individual navigation exercise over 10 checkpoints at one stage, and you're doing an activity every time you're there that you got taught 2 days earlier. So memory retention, ability to be, trainability, ability to apply what you've learned quickly are all traits that they're looking for.
Yeah.
You then get on these trucks at the end of an activity, you come back, and then there's just all of these putchies, we call them, they're just a A-frame, sort of A-shaped tent that you sleep under. You're sleeping on the ground with a small foam mat for these 21 days while your body's degrading. And you come back and there's just all these tents gone. So you just you don't even see them leave. So you just come back and there's just less and less and less. The first phase, is very much group, lots of physical training, there was no way anybody was pulling me off that course.
It was just more.
It was,
It's like, it's fine.
I had prepared myself. The only way that they were going to take me off that course was on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And even then, they would have had to strap me into it.
I think there's a bit about whenever you are trying to achieve something challenging, or I even had this thought, the thing came across my inbox about it. You want to be exceptional. By definition, you got to be the exception.
Mm.
And so you've got to do something that other people aren't.
Mm.
And most people, like the first, 80 that dropped off, that it's almost like there's no permission for it to suck. Like they just get this confrontation of like, they've done all this training and then maybe subconsciously they think this will be manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's really hard and it's confronting, they just pop and go, no, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's like, well, what were you expecting?
Yeah, I love that.
And any pursuit, like what were you expecting this to be?
Mm.
If it was easy, it wouldn't be exceptional because everyone would do it. And you need to be the exception. So therefore, by virtue of the definition, you've got to do something different. Therefore, you have to be okay with the fact that it sucks, and it's hard and it needs to be exceptional. It's almost a prerequisite.
100%. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you get into the second week, finish the...
So I actually knocked out the 100Ks in about 3 days, and you had 5 days to do it. So
Solo?
Yeah, so individual navigation, you got a compass map, and you're just taking your bearing and you're walking. And at this stage, though, so we're heading into probably somewhere around day 10 to 12, my feet are really starting to fall apart. So something that I hadn't considered in my training, I'd done a lot of kilometers, but I hadn't done a lot of walking in my boots in like bush, rough terrain where your foot rolls around and moves and everything, hot spots.
Yeah, blisters.
And my feet were starting to blister ridiculously. So point for later on. The final 5 days, somewhere from 16 to 21 at the stage, and they've made variations to this. Some days they've gone to 22 because everyone's like, oh, it's a 21-day course. They've taken watches off them now, all sorts of things to take that
idea.
Yeah. Get that ability to track things. Another, just a mind game. So 16 to 21, you're back down to the final remaining people, and you've probably got 40 at this stage, and you're broken into teams or patrols. And, you've got maybe 8 people per group. So say there's 5 groups, and you are just made to carry some of the most hideous weights on top of your already 50-kilo pack for at least daylight hours. So, call it 12 hours a day. You would get to a stop, have a bit of an activity, something mentally challenging. Could be mechanical aptitude, flipping a log over. One of them was like a caber toss, flipping the log over end to end along a dirt airstrip, but you couldn't have the log slide or not touch the ground. So you had to lift it onto the end. And we're talking a probably 15-foot decent piece of timber round. And then you had to lower it from that vertical position.
It couldn't touch the ground.
No, it was to touch the ground, had to remain touching the whole time, but then it had to obviously leave over and remain touching, but not slide.
Okay.
And if the directing staff identified that it slid or got lifted off the ground, you had to go back to the start and start again. Right.
How far's the strip?
Oh, the airstrip would have been probably 400 or 500 meters long, easy at least. Stuff that's just designed so that you can't complete it. Some things that were designed for almost sheer luck if you weren't particularly good at something. So you're doing these activities. One of them's carrying a Zodiac inflatable craft, so a larger version of your surf club rubber duckies. Yeah. So much larger, like half full of a large water bladder or a fuel bladder, but there's water in there, so it's sloshing around, and you've got this between your 8 people. You've fashioned logs to it or branches so that you can carry it on your shoulders, and it's just crushing you.
Yeah.
And then you're walking through waist-high bush across whatever the terrain is. It's just there to test your resolve. Obviously, your physicality, and this is the part that I think a lot of people that have passed selection that recognise, but those trying out for it, that your body's capable of so much more. You'll understand this. It's your mindset. It's your willingness and your resolve to keep your body going. Keep that mind in check and know that you can do this, the only thing that's going to stop you is your willingness and your mind. So, and that's, like you said, that's when people tap out. For some people, it's really early. Typically at that point, people start to drop off for medical reasons. So by the end of this 168 people, 21-day process, so you can finish the course, but then still not be selected. And that then comes down to your board of studies, where you have been judged over that 21 days by the directing staff for the attributes that they're looking for the unit. And we had a few. There was probably 4 or 5 that finished that didn't get selected. But ultimately, we had 24 soldiers and 4 officers in the 2004 February selection that passed out of that 168.
How old are you?
24, turning 25 in a couple of months.
Yeah, right.
And having completed my second selection course, I got selected, which was a surprise to even my girlfriend and my family, and maybe my family at the time, I'm not sure. But yeah, phone call back to Sydney and, oh yeah, I got in. We're moving to Perth.
Yeah, right.
The most challenging part of that 21 days for me was during those last 5 days, I really started to struggle on my right foot. And I later found out I had a stress fracture. I was told that people were being withdrawn, were trying to withdraw medically from the course to come back and give it another shot because they had blisters. And I had a friend from the unit, sometime after say to me that people were getting told, no, there's someone out there that's got feet way worse than you. The last sort of 2 days I was walking on a stress fractured foot. That played on my mind more than anything. Not that I wasn't still out there trying, that I was being judged against those that could do more. And that was apparent in one of the final exercises where I couldn't weight bear as much as everybody else in what we're carrying. So I was put into a position within the team where I didn't have to by the directing staff. But, I sort of now know that I'd done enough. They were
already
happy.
Yeah. And presumably the fact that you weren't trying to tap out.
Yeah.
You're like, just give me a different role, or you even weren't saying that. They were
No,
giving
I
you.
didn't. At all. It was.
It's exceptional, man. But you passed that.
Yep.
And now you're even more so wanting to be playing in the game.
Yeah, but you got to go through all up, from that point, another 14 months worth of special forces training, different courses. A couple of them I'd done over at the Commandos, but yeah, you're not there. You're just learning your trade. So another 14 months of being scrutinised. Again, some really hard training. 12-week, 3 months water operations course. So small craft handling, diving, surface fitting, anything in the maritime environment, you became a specialist. That was my role. And all this time had chosen to remain as a signal specialist. So you could choose, most people going to the SAS would choose to be an SAS operator or soldier. It's attached to an employment code number, just a category for the system to align you to. So that's essentially infantry. That's the role, is to be the first guys through the door or on the assault. I chose to stay in the corps that I joined for a few potential opportunities in the future that were very niche at the time. There was only 2 roles that you could choose to stay in, and that was communications specialist or a medical specialist, because they needed those roles in the fundamental small teams, to the point where each of the SAS guys learnt one of those roles in a small capacity, to be a signals guy or a medic.
Medic, yeah. So
I was well above that. So I'd done months worth of communications training and then months worth of Special Forces communications training on special equipment. 2005, finished my reinforcement cycle, a team member and a signaller within an SAS troop. And we're first back to Afghanistan in 2005 on rotation 1 for Special Operations Task Group. Now that was the real deal. Not just
the game was on.
The game was definitely on. Our first patrol out from the Australian base in Tarancot, and it wasn't as many of the podcasts that I've listened to from 2009 through to 14 when it closed down. It was a fantastic base. I never got to see it like that.
Yeah,
I was in
early days.
I was in US tents with sandbags, about 1 metre high at the base of it. There was aircon, it was good, so there was heating and cooling. Yeah, there was no mess. We're eating ration packs, MREs, American MREs, but it was soldiering. It was great, and we went out on our first mobility patrol, situational awareness for the region. We were travelling 100 kilometres up into what was essentially the birthplace of the Taliban, as I later sort of found out, the Cod Valley. It took us 5 days to get there. The terrain and just the IED threat, although it was minimal, it was more mines, old Russian mines at that stage, but the going was just slow. And we stayed there for a night and we kept pushing through. On our return, we had picked up some radio chatter that the Taliban were sort of going to mass to hit us or ambush us, and we had to get through a small village with a dogleg in it, where vehicles could only be in single file because there was a river crossing right after it. So we were kind of channeled, and it had happened. It kicked off there. This was my first patrol out with SAS. And
when you say it happened, you mean active gunfire? And
so the intelligence reports were hit by a force of 300 people. And I would say that's pretty accurate because I saw at least 10 cars under binoculars that had, you may not believe this, 15 people in each, like Toyota Hilux. Right. So you got at least five people in the cabin. There are 10 people in the tray standing up.
Yeah, okay.
Jammed in like sardines.
Yeah.
You know, so when you see 10 of those, there's at least 150 minimum.
How many of you?
30.
Yeah, right.
And some of them were Afghan National Army that we had with us. Unfortunately, one of those guys died in that contact. But it kicked off. We're actually just driving through the village, well aware that something was about to kick off. We had a dismounted element from the cars that were clearing in and around the building. So we've got large caliber machine guns and 40mm grenade launchers on the cars, but they can't shoot right next to you. Okay, they're for a few hundred meters away at a minimum. So rifles and guys off the cars clearing around buildings. A particular senior guy had come around one of the buildings and startled somebody that was hiding there waiting to shoot us from behind, I would say, after we passed. And he was so startled that he spun and pulled his trigger and just sprayed straight into the other, our member, which one of the rounds shot his hearing protection. So active noise hearing protection, similar to like these headphones, to stop the loud percussive noises of ballistics, and shot that off his head. He then obviously took him out, and that's what started. And I happened to be in the lead vehicle at this stage, which shouldn't have happened. The reason it shouldn't have happened is, so I'm the troop communicator, so I've got all the important radios that reach back to the headquarters. And in my car is the troop boss, and this very experienced guy. Isn't now an officer, but he was in the as a soldier in the SAS for some 18 years. He's done over 20 years. Another senior patrol commander as the driver. And we're about to come out of the village. We're in that last between the last two buildings. So in a total choke point, and a rocket propelled grenade gets fired from a few hundred meters away directly in front and spears straight into the front of the car. And then just the whole cornfield in front of us just lit up with muzzle flashes and rounds going past us. So when I say it kicked off,
kicked off. So what happened to the car?
So fortunately, I believe, again, not having been on the nasty end of an RPG at that point in time, it was a dud round. It penetrated into the radiator. It set off some smoke canisters that we had on the front of the car to mask our position. You could buy them. It set them off, so there was some discharge from that, from the primer from that. So there was a half decent puff, but it definitely wasn't like a small high explosive.
You guys jumped out of the car at that stage?
So I'm sitting in the ring mount at the top, and whether or not I was judged by colleagues for this or not, I have a choice here to start firing a 40mm automatic grenade launcher into
wherever the hell it's come from.
Likely positions.
Is that your role?
That was my role. Yeah, okay. That's where I was. That's what I was there to do. And I see the most experienced guy in the troop commander, 20-something years, jump out of the car, exit left. The troop JTAC and a patrol commander, so another senior guy, whose job was to call in air support, grab his radio and jump out. So in my mind, in that instant, I'm a sitting duck. I'm sitting on the X. They've just hit us with their first shot. They've ranged us in. They can just repeat. So I had a split moment decision to say, well, do I get rid of this liner of a 40mm and get their heads down, or am I about to get hit with another round?
Yeah.
And because the car wasn't going to be moving, they actually thought the car was disabled from the first shot. So I jumped out.
Yeah.
The pursuing 4 hours went in what felt like 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
We got out of that. We'd taken one.
How does that end? There's 150 of them and 30 of you.
Yeah.
Do they just move on and get tired or run out?
No. So, there were various times where the team collectively provided, fire support to bring those vehicles back out of the village. So the last 2 cars did their role and went up to the high ground and provided fire support so the rest of us could reverse and, do crazy Austin Powers 3-point turns to to get out of there.
Yeah.
It was messy. Yeah. It was, but, we got out and ended up having some American air support come through. So Apache gunships come through and, provided that overhead sort of cover support. And we drove back through with Americans on the other side of the river providing overwatch and the air support.
Wow.
Went back to their base for the night, only to be held and wrapped in cotton wool by the Australian government for the next 5 days. Stories you don't hear because they didn't want to suffer an Australian death, I would say, so early in the conflict.
Yeah, right. How do you reflect on all that now? Because I get so intrigued in this show to be able to talk to people whose life experiences are unique.
Mm.
Your eyes, your brain has seen things and experienced things that not too many people do. So how do you reflect on that now, all of those experiences over there?
If I look at my military career in general, there's just so many elements that I learned from. That particular time that was my role. That was the job that I was there to do. We had a mission to, ground truth and influence tribes and villages and all the rest of that because there was going to be the first election for the country. But the military part, the military piece is interesting. I don't draw a lot from the tactical things that we did, other than teamwork, communication, high performing team cultures, all of those sorts of things. There's some great fundamentals there that I've taken on. What I really draw from the most is, again, back to your first question, the things that I struggled with when the apparent moments that things weren't fair. I guess we need to probably fast forward a little bit here. Afghanistan 2005, 4 or so month tour, just missed Christmas, got home a few days later. I had a very young child at the time, I think 8 months old, so I came back to about 13 months old. 2006, deployed to East Timor at very short notice for the riots, the ensuing civil unrest. 2007, went back to East Timor, all whilst high-tempo training and on standby counter-terrorism duties domestically. And internationally. Stuff happening in Iraq at that stage. There'd already been a Douglas Wood incident earlier. So if somebody gets taken or, there's some sort of requirement for a recovery or intelligence, we're on as a domestic counterterrorism. 2008, go back to Afghanistan. At this point, I'd sort of recognized that, maybe I hadn't made the right decision to stay as a comms guy. And I'd put in transfer paperwork to go and do the infantry stuff, rather than being the guy that carries the radio the whole time, to be a team member that's potentially first through the door. Regardless, I'd actually fulfilled that role in East Timor.
Yeah, sure.
So, I was
We trained that way anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd done the same training. So there were times that I was employed in that manner. But for whatever reasons, people decided to make the process challenging for me. And I think this is just, you're always going to have differences of opinions in any organization. There are elements within every workplace that, if supported enough and have their, I guess, degree of influence, can create a shift. I just seem to find it difficult to, in my opinion, have an equitable process during that transition. So and that led into the 2008 trip to Afghanistan. The job had changed remarkably. We started doing direct action targeting. So again, this is where we're chasing down bad players that we know are in the area and actively going out there on night missions, getting dropped off by vehicles, walking 15 kilometres in over terrain at 3,500 meters altitude to kill or capture medium to high value targets, transiting through or hiding in the area. Very busy for a number of weeks doing that every night, sleeping during the day, getting up, briefings, etc. And then you might have a week or so where you slower tempo and only if something really big pops up that you react. But during this time, I'm apparently being assessed for the job that I've really been doing for the last 4 years. Then I just had an incident on that trip that morally challenged me. I took that to, again, people that were higher ranked than me and that I believed would follow due process, and it sort of came back in my face more than anything. And this is where the crux of ethically, I was challenged. I specifically pulled my transition at that point because I didn't like what I saw from a couple of individuals. It wasn't until the organisation, the Greater Special Forces organisation, decided that we're going to get rid of this communications, SAS and Commando role. You're going to be Special Forces, you've got to do the infantry side. So there I was in 2009 having to think about this.
Yeah.
As part of that, they had the remuneration tribunal reviews all different pay and conditions for the military. They had changed a bunch of courses that made you an SAS soldier. And I recall overnight I had your payday, your check funds have come in. I hadn't been paid. I received a letter in the mail the very next day saying that I owed the government, Defence, $20,000 in back pay.
Because you're no longer, by their standards, up to qualification.
Correct. Now, everyone that was infantry was given a grace period, sunset clause.
Yeah, right.
Everybody that was support had basically to justify why they needed it, but we weren't told prior. Enormous stress.
Yeah.
Young family.
No warning, no.
Oh, and this is
in 3 months' time, this is what we're doing.
Being on 3 operational tours.
And this is in the same time as you're ethically challenged over in Middle East.
Yeah. For myself, not for everybody, but for myself, the differentiating qualification was a truck license. A standard army truck license. They had changed what you needed to be able to drive or to be a qualified Special Forces driver.
Right.
And it was a standard army course. And you actually couldn't get on these courses. They were just so hard to do in WA because there's not a large regular army presence. It was ridiculous. But again, the failing here was the hierarchy didn't want to fix it.
No support.
It took somebody to go to the media, and history shows us the 2009 SAS Pay Scandal hit the newspapers, and that was the only thing that got things moving for dozens of guys that were affected by this.
Yeah, right.
Some now in their 40s and the like that had been doing, working under that particular system for 15 or 20 years. So again, starting to see these systemic failures of bureaucracy and driven by, some individuals. Sometimes it was greater than that, but a real lack of empathy and lack of support.
And I think you said to me as well that you could have seen, you did see all the horrific images and experiences as war would do.
Yeah.
But they're not the things that are keeping you up. It is this experience or this feeling of unworthiness, or the post-traumatic experience is stemming back from your value of wanting to help, but I guess crossed or up against not feeling validated by giving.
The moral injustice. So PTSD is a fundamental breaking of your core values. You're correct. I had seen some horrific things from that first trip and that very first patrol out, which I told you personally, through to that 2008 trip. We were doing a handover patrol. The car in front of me hit an ID, and there were some injuries from that. It was probably 15 feet in front of me. I felt the percussion, the blast wave, the whole lot. There were numerous injuries from it. That did affect me physically coming home for a number of months after that. But that waned, which was great. But the things that sat with me was being betrayed. The feeling of being betrayed by the people, or the organisation, I should say, that I was supporting, that I had given everything to.
And the injustice around that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they got rid of the whole signals thing, and I had to go through the transition again if I wanted to stay in the job. The irony. So then I went through it all again and got asked to go back and do some courses. There was a couple of short courses that I didn't have to do as a comms guy. So how to really blow things up, demolition courses for how to get into buildings and the like. Method of entry, it's called. Sort of counter-terrorism driver. Again, it was not something that you would do. So you learned to drive the fast Land Cruisers up to a, domestic counter-terrorism scene to deliver a team onto target in very short time. But then particular individual in one position that had the authority told me to go back and do that 3-month water operations course again over a technicality. So I did it. And I did it because others in the unit command said, sometimes you just got to do these things. So I did it. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was hard. That was hard on my family. My wife had a miscarriage during that time. But I stuck it out because that's what the system required. That's what the organization required. This was going to get me over the line. This was it. This was the last thing. Finished it. Great. Went down to an SAS troop, the same one that I'd ironically started in 8 years earlier. This is now, 7 years earlier. This is now 2011. And was there for 5 or 6 months. No issues. Almost deployed to Egypt at the time. You remember the unrest in Egypt. So there's going to be a few guys go over for that. It ended up being reduced. Just a couple. Yeah, early 2012, I get told, you've got to go back and do 3 months of the most advanced shooting course that we did, which I passed successfully in 2005. Why? Oh, you're not up to scratch. Really? Where's the reporting? Who says? Yeah. In my mind, the injustices just kept coming, just kept rolling. And yeah, it took me to a point where I just had to say, I'm better than this. I've done everything. I know my worth.
Yeah, sure.
So that's a really long-winded answer to come back to the things that, I've taken out at all of these situations in the military. But ultimately for me, what I want to pass on to people is to know when to let an organization or, a person know, steadfastly, no, you know your own worth, you know what value you bring, and you need to stand by that and put that up on a pedestal more than whatever they may be judging you. Because there's bigger and better things out there that you can be doing. So.
Well, I think that's a huge lesson, and I really appreciate you sharing it, because our values, which is, essentially our currency, and by virtue of that, our worth, is all we've got, like individually. And you need to be able to draw a line in the sand at some point to say, no, you've gone beyond a tolerance level that I'm willing to accept.
I think somebody said to me just recently that people won't remember you from your time with them, be it work, professionally or otherwise, around what it was that you did. They're not going to have that finite memory. They're going to remember your character. You're going to remember how you treated them. I can reflect back on that, and I'm sure there were people that didn't like me. I'm sure there were people that, because I did a different job slightly, or I chose not to be one of them, or whatever it may have been, judge me. I think I can stand by myself and know that I treated everybody with respect, fairly, non-judgmentally.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to remember.
Tim, it's such a great story. And we haven't even got into SOTER.
Oh, shall we?
Your desire to still help. You can't get away from that, because that's a...
No, but it was also, I left in a really rapid process. There was still things that had happened. I was still trying to find a place within that unit that I knew. I'd pulled myself off that course. I did 4 weeks. I had a big chip on my shoulder. I admit that. But, I was that person just swimming against the waves. And I couldn't see that those waves weren't going to stop, even if I finished that. Again, another 12 weeks of the most advanced combat training that you do. So I decided to leave, and I ended up having a meeting with senior soldiers, etc. And again, was told something was possible, and I took some leave and I came back and it wasn't possible. And it was at that point I just went, mic drop, out. And I left so quickly that I had to draw on what I was good at and where I had some passion. And that's been a common thread for the last 10 or so years. So I was passionate about medicine. I love that part of the trauma training that I got to do. Because I was a comms guy, they couldn't put me on a 6-week comms course. I was teaching it, so they put me on the medics course. And I did some fantastic trauma training. So I took that and I went into the sort of industrial sector, mining as a medic. That progressed into doing a bachelor's of paramedicine over 2 years. And then shortly after achieving that, I realized I wasn't going to get the clinical skills that I wanted in mining to progress in paramedicine. And I saw the way to better benefit, I guess, the industry that I was learning was to be proactive, not reactive. And I found my attention to detail and my ability to communicate with people really were well received in health, safety, environment advising, so workplace health and safety
Yep.
stuff. I did that for a couple of years and moved into oil and gas over here in Queensland, actually, on the coal seam gas project from mining. Then got to start with ExxonMobil, largest multinational oil and gas company in the world, and did great at it. And, did that for the next 2014 to essentially 2020. So started in Australia, offshore WA, then Bass Strait, where they had the Victorian gas fields. West Africa, went into the corporate side in Angola, and good old trauma revisits. I'm working for a manpower company, and they decide to not pay me overnight because of the tanking Angolan Kwanza dollar versus the US. And here I am earning fantastic money, basically donating my time for the next, donating my time for the next 4 weeks. So they said, we can't pay you in US dollars. You can either take Angolan Kwanza, which was about a sixth of the value, or just wait indefinitely and maybe get little payments every now and again. Not really knowing how much 2009 had really affected me at that stage, that was a real kick in the guts. Kind of reminded me of one of your previous, forget his name, sorry, the Olympic swimmer.
Yeah, right.
2012 London.
Yeah, Brendan Riggard.
Yep. Letter in the mail,
yeah.
Just so that actually triggered, I'd already been medicated for some post-traumatic stress back in 2014. And I seemed to be fairly stable, but I saw things starting to decline then. Yeah, that was a catalytic moment. And I went into the hole for about 18 months. Tough on my family. Got 2 young girls and a baby boy by that stage. A lot of strain on the marriage. We'd moved to Queensland by that stage. So when I started to rotate to Angola, we'd moved to Noosa, closer to family. Found myself just trying to figure out who I was, I think, It's confronting. I felt like I'd achieved and become someone, that could be revered, I guess. That, the things that I've achieved in my military career, were only achieved by a small proportion of society. And to be then, successful post the military, I guess, to a degree, and then just to be questioning my worth. I just found myself, just really confused, and had a number of symptoms going on. So, and this is the time where I open up the door with Department of Vets Affairs, and you go through all the processes and medical reviews and all the rest of that. This is the defining time in my life. I can either be a victim, or am I the person that I was on these selection courses, and find the resolve and know that there's a way through. Just put your next step forward. Don't focus on day 21. Don't focus on the next day. Focus on the next 5 minutes, the next hour.
And you were in the hole for 18 months though, so presumably it took you that long to get to that place. Yeah, I can resonate with that so much. Or certainly, like for you had the tools and you had the track record of being able to endure and to handle and to have that resolve, yet it still took you 18 months to get back to trust that you could get yourself out of it. And it took me a number of months to be in the hole at the relevant time of my life, right? And I still lament the fact that it took me that long, to go, come on, you had all the person that you are, it took you months to get out of the quicksand. How do you reflect on the fact that it took you that long?
Some of it was probably by design. I was fortunate enough through the fact that most of it stemmed from the military and recognised through Department of Vets Affairs. I had an outpatient program, cognitive-based therapy. I had a paramedic degree. I understood the physiological symptoms, anxiety, whatever else it was, depression that was happening. I understood that it was neurochemical, and ultimately I had a passion then to learn. I knew
there was a way
enough, but it was like, just understand yourself better. You've got to do that work on yourself, because and CBT might not be the answer for everybody, but for me, it gave me the tools to understand that when I was feeling a particular way or when I was reacting a particular way, it's like, this is happening.
Map. Yeah.
Once I could piece that together, then, you had a bit more of a path for you to then apply that next step forward. Could it have been done quicker? Maybe. But when you're looking at a 12-week program that's spaced out for,
Sure.
certain days and the like. So
It took the time that it needed to take.
yeah. And then there was the, returning to work side. So I just went back to something that I was passionate about. Taught basic first aid in Noosa for, a day a week. Actually, it was probably a day a fortnight, I think, for another organisation. And this was the aha moment. This was the glimmer. Here I am teaching product that I recognised was substandard. We'd been doing stuff with immediate trauma training in the military, which has now become an internationally accredited course for defence, really. And I knew this had progressed into a civilian capacity for law enforcement and high-risk industry. And I'm looking at what 20-year nurses are coming in having to do in basic first aid, because nurses can be anywhere from emergency departments to
non-critical.
Yeah. So, and, they're telling me that's the best refresher I've ever done. I'm like, oh, thanks. Okay. So
We're into something here. Yeah.
So I start pulling it apart. I'm like, I'm just giving them the little 1%ers that I know work. That was the brainchild, really, moment for SOTER International. I wanted to draw on the things that, from my transition out of defence, a lack of accredited training, I had to go and get, pay for various recognition of prior learning in diplomas in paramedicine and occupational health and safety to give me a leg up, into the jobs that I was wanting to do, all off my own bat. So, I was passionate about giving people the right types of training, but also ensuring that it was accredited and credentialed. So I sought out better training, and it was in a US program, National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians. We do everything from, the layman first on the scene turning up to a car accident or similar to, paramedics, nurses doing clinical professional development. And my main concern at that point was, okay, mums and dads and other industries, there's not heaps of high-risk industry that are needing this, but our military are going to be doing the military stuff, sure. What the hell are our police and emergency services doing? And that's when I went, oh, God. Looked into it. They're doing the same thing mums and dads are doing.
Yeah, okay. There's no real difference.
Yeah. So, and I just, this is the protector in me, the part that just went, I was afforded great training in the military. These people are out there, our brothers in blue, emergency services, paramedics, fireys, they're out there every day.
Yeah.
Seeing probably more trauma than I saw, taking it home and having to deal with their families, I had the blessing of being able to, compartmentalize and segregate my military deployments from my family. These men and women do it on a daily basis and have to bring it home. I wanted to ensure that they could get home every night at a minimum. That's the first part.
Yeah.
So we brought the accredited training in the civilian model, the tactical emergency casualty care, both for, your general duties police through to your sort of special operations and paramedics and the like. And that was what we were going to do in 2020. I'd gone back to ExxonMobil for a little bit of time. COVID sort of caught us out of being able to rotate easily, and then there was some other open source media things that I realised triggered me a lot with regards to the unit that I worked in, which has been, an ongoing thing that I'm not going to say doesn't affect me, and to realise that we've got a face-to-face training company that's just been registered and we can't train anybody. Can't even get the people in to accredit the company. So with all the COVID lockdowns. So pivoted. We employed paramedics and nurses, and we have just managed to get through the last, 3 or 4 years through TV support contracts, SAS Series 1, back in 2020, COVID, rapid antigen testing. We were some of the early adopters for that.
Right.
With another organisation here on the coast. So, we were providing that to industry that couldn't shut down, So
sure.
24/7 organisations in heavy industry or manufacturing, high risk stuff again. Yeah, that's got us through the last sort of few years. A little bit of training. It's built slowly.
Yeah.
But there's the challenge is it's changing a narrative. We're trying to change an entire narrative towards what is fit for purpose care for first responders.
What's the goal?
Standardisation nationally. for all emergency services to do. Doesn't have to be our program. Just do the best training out there.
Yeah.
A version of our training. I chose our training because it's internationally recognised, accredited, and credentialed.
Yeah.
Again, the importance of tying back into giving back to the things that I didn't get out of defence. Like if people come out of the organisations they're in, then when they move on, they've got something tangible to go, look, I can do this. You know, so there are some police organisations in Australia that are doing this training at the moment. They're not doing it, by my opinion, through a, you know, relevantly underwritten organisation to give them that credentialing. And
I can only imagine you at the top, though, with what you've been able to endure and your knowledge and your know-how, it won't be an issue. You know, understand that it's not easy, and like those trips, like the 100-kilometer trek, you know, it'll be worth it. It'll end. It'll get easier.
It will end one way or another.
But I think it's and it obviously ticks those boxes of what your values are.
Yeah, so much so.
Gives you that drive and that motivation to help others.
Yep.
And to under your own steam as well.
Everything that I've been through, I now tie back to family.
Yeah.
It's so important for me to be there for my kids. It's the number one priority, is to be available for them across these last 8 or so years.
Yeah.
You know, I was away for almost, 20 years of various careers, from military to mining, oil and gas.
Yeah.
You know, the best rosters were 50-50. You know, back when they were really little, I was gone 9 months of the year.
Yeah, wow.
Even if you were just 2 hours down the road, you weren't at home at night. Made sure that I'm doing everything I can to make up for that time.
Tim, I really appreciate your honesty and openness today.
My pleasure.
Before you go, let's get some fast questions.
Do my best.
What does success mean to you?
Generally, achievements in whatever pursuit you apply yourself to. They don't have to be grand.
And happiness? What does happiness mean to you?
A single word: gratitude. To be thankful for the things that we have. At the moment, look, we'll get into it with the books, but I've listened to a lot of Dr. Jordan Peterson. We live in a unprecedented time of prosperity. May not feel like it. There's always challenges in the world that we live in, difficult periods of living, but these contemporary pressures are they dwarf what our forefathers have had to go through. We are the healthiest, most capable at this point in time than ever in our history. So just gratitude, just being able to be in the moment and just be grateful for the things that we do have.
Yeah. Okay, and books then?
Yeah, 12 Rules. 12 Rules is definitely, look, I'm not a big reader either. I did tell you that when we caught up. I'm not a big reader, but 12 Rules.
Yeah.
And look, here's a little, maybe lesser known one, but this hit me, and this has been part of my growth. Gratitude, Empathy, and Mindfulness. It's the Resilience Project by Hugh Van Cuylenburg. I got so much out of that book.
Yeah, amazing. 4 people who you would invite to dinner, not family or friends, but could be alive or dead.
I'll give you 3. Either Ricky Gervais or Jimmy Carr.
Nice.
Okay. Thomas Lawrence of Arabia. Aside from the military story there, it's because he's the author of my favourite quote, and that is, "Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake up in the day to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible." So I really want to dig into,
into his brain.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Winston Churchill, how that gentleman managed stress, and understand. He took little naps and sleep and all this sort of thing, but he's potentially got the eyes of the free world on him over a period of 5 or 6 years of what was the grandest war at the time and potential collapse of Europe. I don't know why I'm going to say this, but you know what? I grew up, my dad loved Roy Orbison.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why that comes to mind.
Was that or Taylor Swift, right?
Well, I know my daughters would prefer probably Taylor, but yeah.
Well, they're not part of the dinner, so.
They're not true. All right, let's go with Taylor.
Then finally, Tim, someone that you think we should interview on the show.
Not really well connected with, I think, people that are super interesting on a business side or the like. So, and that's what came to mind. But as far as success times happiness, I'd love to hear you interview John Wynne. He's a former 2nd Commando Regiment Commando, and his story around recovery from drug abuse after his soldiering career to now be a world competitor in high rocks. He's based out of Spain, and he's just had his 2nd child, and I follow him, reached out, chatted a bit on Instagram and the like, but his story that I've heard through a military-centric podcast is something I think this podcast would be great from your perspective.
I appreciate that.
So I've already warned him out if you wanna.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's do that. This has been beautiful. I really appreciate it. There's an enormous amount of lessons to be learnt from your experience for everyone, and certainly for myself. So thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. We hope you really enjoyed it. Next time you're at a boot camp, turn to the person next to you and let them know all about the show. It means the world to us. Until next time, peace.